Well, greetings, everybody. This is your favorite speaker, once again, Ron Brown. And there you can see me in the picture in one of the great cities of Ethiopia, Lalibela. Well, today we are going to explore a fascinating topic in history, and this is the search for the city of the Queen of Sheba. Where is Sheba? Everybody knows the Queen of Sheba, movies and everything about her, but we know very little factual evidence of where was the city of the Queen of Sheba. So let's get started on our exploration of the lost city of the Queen of Sheba. Well, first, who was the Queen of Sheba? What do we know about her? How the Ethiopians have elaborated this legend into central to their historic identity, and then how the Queen of Sheba continues alive until today in movies, in films, and in popular culture, and even exploiting the Queen of Sheba for all kinds of tacky economic and cultural and thrills in love, sex, and romance. So let's get going. Well, the Queen of Sheba, as you can see from the magnificent film by Yul Brynner and Gina Lollobrigida, is part of our culture. In 1959, the famous romantic story of love and sex and intrigue and mystery between Solomon, the king of the Hebrew people in Palestine, Israel, and the Queen of Sheba, a story that continues to intrigue everybody. Well, the big question that we confront is, where was Sheba? The only indication we have from the Bible is that it was to the south of the kingdom of Israel. Some people say it was Aksum in Ethiopia. Others say that the city of Saba in modern day Yemen was the original city of Sheba. Others say that it was the great Zimbabwe civilization of southern Africa. That is where the Queen of Sheba came from. Well, where was the land of Sheba? This is one of the great mysteries of history. Well, Duarte Lopez back in 1591 thought that he had solved the mystery of the Queen of Sheba, and going in from the Portuguese colony of Mozambique, he explored into what is today the country of Zimbabwe. And there you see me in the great city of Great Zimbabwe, where he said this was the city of the Queen of Sheba. So here again, the mystery continues to captivate people. Where was this mysterious kingdom? Well, I went to Ethiopia and searched for the Queen of Sheba and the city of Sheba in Ethiopia. I also went to South Africa and went up to Zimbabwe, again exploring another city that just might be the city of the Queen of Sheba. I've been fascinated by the search for Sheba. Here was my trip to Ethiopia. I went to Addis Ababa, and then I made my way north through the city of Lalibela, and I was going up to Aksum and searching in the mountains of Ethiopia. Where was Sheba? Well, Ethiopians and many people argue that Sheba was actually the city of Aksum. If you look at the map at the bottom on the right, you see Ethiopia. In the far north, you see the city of Aksum, very much influenced by the Egyptians with their temples and with their pyramids, part of the ancient world. Well, the city of Aksum went by many names. In ancient history, it was Meroe. According to the Bible, it was the kingdom of Cush, but it was a great empire to the south of the kingdom of Israel. And many people argue, and especially Ethiopians insist, that the Queen of Sheba ruled from the ancient city of Aksum. Well, here again you see Ethiopia and the far north, the ancient city of Aksum. Well, I got as far as Addis Ababa. If you look at the map on the right, you see the letter A, capital of Ethiopia. I went north to the letter of B, Lalibela, and plan to go north to letter C, the city of Aksum. Well, war broke out between the peoples of the north and the peoples of the south. And I got an email from the State Department said, get your ass out of Ethiopia as quickly as you can. Well, all the buses were filled, the roads were filled, people fleeing the north. Accidents like the one you see on the right, dirt roads ruined from the rains. Well, it took me 17 hours on a van to go 425 miles, but I escaped back to Addis Ababa. So I never found Aksum, the city of the Queen of Sheba, or so the Ethiopians argue. Well, the Queen of Sheba is one of these ancient legends, one of these ancient stories that has thrilled people from antiquity. Think of the Garden of Eden, the ancient Babylonian legend, Assyrian legend that was accepted by the Jews and incorporated into their holy book, the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament, the Christians, the Muslims, the Mormons, and everybody until today has added a new dimension to this ancient myth of a Garden of Eden. Well, myths grow. They evolve. We have myths of heaven and myths of hell and myths of the devil and all kinds of myths, so well described in Joseph Campbell's wonderful book, The Power of Myth. No, a myth doesn't mean it's not true. It means it is one of these ancient stories lost in ancient antiquity that we still believe. Well, the first reference to the Queen of Sheba is in the Jewish Bible, the Book of Kings and the Book of Chronicles. And in Kings, for example, we see that the Queen of Sheba, wherever that was, went and heard of Solomon's great wisdom. And here we see that she came to the king and I said, I have heard great stories of your achievements and wisdom. And I have come here and I have discovered that these legends, these stories of your greatness and wisdom were far greater than what I had heard. And in the book of Chronicles, they describe the greatness of the king of Israel, Solomon. And in the book of Kings 1, it said that she took 20 talents of gold and spices, a very great store, and precious stones to give as gifts to this legendary King Solomon. Well, painters in Europe have loved this story of the encounter of the queen of the distant land of Sheba and the great Solomon. Well, of course, in Europe, when they painted the pictures of the Queen of Sheba, such as the one on the left, we see, I mean, she is so pale-skinned that she could have been from Sweden. But then again, that was the European interpretation that this great queen could only have been white. She couldn't have been black. Well, evidently, they had a great encounter. Now, historians give the date of King Solomon 970 to 931 before the Common Era. The Christian Bible also picks up the story of the Queen of Sheba. And in fact, it gives her a name in the book of Acts. They say she was Candice, who was the Queen of Ethiopia. And so the story starts to evolve beyond the first mentions in the Jewish Bible. And it said that she had come to Jerusalem to meet the great legendary King Solomon. And in the Christian Bible, it says that one of the Ethiopians had actually accepted the teaching of Jesus and converted to Christianity. So already this ancient Queen of Sheba is present in the Jewish Bible and the Christian Bible. The Quran of the Muslims also picks up on the story and gives her a different name. The Queen of Sheba was Bilqis. Again, she recognized Solomon's nobility and went to Solomon and offered him advice. And according to the Quran, she was so impressed with King Solomon that, for some reason, she embraced Islam. Now, the Muslims believe that Islam is the culmination of God's revelation, beginning with Adam and Eve and Noah and Solomon and David. And so she recognized that Judaism was just the next step in God's revelation, and it would be culminated in Islam. Well, the story gets even more complicated. We have a book called The Alphabet of Ben Sira in the 9th century of the present era, the Christian era, the Common Era. And the story is, according to Ben Sira, that the Queen of Sheba went, encountered Solomon, and that Solomon noticed that she had very hairy legs. And Solomon, in his infinite wisdom, came up with a cream, mixture of arsenic and lime, applied this to her legs, and miraculously, her legs were hairless. Now, of course, this was before the age of electric razors and Bic razors, and so this was already a problem for women. Another great writer, Yazid al-Tabur, in the 900s of the Common Era, elaborated the story even more. That the Queen of Sheba went to Solomon. Solomon found her very attractive and served a wonderful dinner with very spicy and salty food, but did not give her water to drink. And so in the middle of the night, poor Queen of Sheba was roaming Solomon's palace looking for something to drink. Well, Solomon caught her stealing water from his palace. And her punishment was she had to have sex with Solomon. And according to this account, she converted to Judaism. She returned to Sheba, wherever that was, and she had a child, and this child was the child of Solomon. Well, all of these legends started merging in Ethiopia, and a whole new legend came into existence that celebrated the Queen of Sheba as the greatest of the queens of Ethiopia. Again, we see the great capital of Meroe, the kingdom of Cush, the kingdom of Ethiopia, where, according to the Ethiopians, the Queen of Sheba ruled. Well, the legend continued to grow in Ethiopia that the son of the Queen of Sheba and Solomon ended up becoming the Emperor Menelik I of Ethiopia. Well, according to the Ethiopian elaboration of the legend, was Menelik returned to Israel and wanted to meet his father. Well, the situation in Israel under the late years of Solomon was one of corruption and degeneracy. King David, who was Solomon's son, was expected to assume the throne. But Menelik found that King David was not really a very effective ruler and was abandoning the strict religion of Judaism. And so Solomon offered Menelik, please come save my kingdom. Become the king of Israel. You are my son. Menelik refused. Well, Menelik left Israel and returned to Saba, and with him many priests and leaders of Israel who were disgusted with the corruption of Solomon and the lack of hope in any solution from David. And so the priests and many thousands of Jews and leaders left with Menelik. Well, before Menelik left Jerusalem, he broke into the temple of Solomon, stole the Ark of the Covenant, which contained the rod of Moses, all the manna from the desert, the Ten Commandments, and he took these back to Sheba and built the church, which we see on the right, where Ethiopians believe the Ark of the Covenant and the Ten Commandments are still preserved. And Menelik said, with the degeneration of Israel, the degeneration of the kingdom of Solomon, the corruption of King David, Ethiopia had become the new Israel. Everywhere you go in Israel, in Ethiopia, you see scenes of the Queen of Sheba. You see charts such as the one below, painted on cloth, hanging in churches, describing the legend of the Queen of Sheba. Now, originally it was believed that the Queen of Sheba, when Menelik came back with all of these items from the temple, converted to Judaism. And the ancient Egyptian legend, the Kebra Nagast, written in about 800 AD, said that the Queen of Sheba's actual name was Megiddo. She returned to Sheba with the priests and the leaders and bore Menelik and Menelik was the founder of the royal dynasty of Ethiopia. And he was the one who went back to Israel, kidnapped the Ten Commandments and the Ark of the Covenant, and that Ethiopia, the queen, the kingdom of Sheba, became a Jewish kingdom. Well, King Enzana of Aksum became a Christian approximately in the 300s AD. He became a follower of the great Jewish teacher, prophet Jesus. And under King Enzana, Ethiopia, the queen of Sheba, the kingdom of Sheba, grew and expanded, crossing over the Red Sea, taking over huge chunks of Saudi Arabia and Yemen, Somalia, and the kingdom of Saba, now a Christian kingdom, flourished. Well, the Ethiopians were deeply involved in the Christian world. We had the Roman Catholics in Italy, the Greek Orthodox in the Byzantine Empire and Constantinople, the Coptic Christian Church of Egypt, and the various churches of the Middle East. And Ethiopia was very much part of this. They attended the Council of Chalcedon in 451. They produced great saints from Syria. For example, Saint Frumentius went from Syria down to Ethiopia, died in Aksum, and was made the first bishop of Ethiopia. The Ethiopians developed their own alphabet, which you see on the right. The ancient language was Gaiz. The modern variant is Amharic, with their own alphabet, their own literature, their own culture. Well, the Ethiopians have never forgotten that their royal family, the kings of Ethiopia, are the true Jews. They are the descendants of Solomon. And so, when the Jews killed Jesus, the Messiah, Ethiopia emerged as the new Israel, the new and only and true Jews. Haile Selassie, the last ruling monarch of Ethiopia, was the descendant of the dynasty of Solomon, and he built palaces and castles and claimed to be the Lion of Judah, the direct and only descendant of King Solomon. Well, in Ethiopia, there were Jews and there were Christians, but you could really hardly separate the two. In Ethiopia, Christians and Jews, as well as Muslims, all practice circumcision. Ethiopian Christians are forbidden to eat pork. All the Ethiopian churches have copies of the Ten Commandments. They go pilgrimage to Jerusalem, build monasteries in ancient Palestine, celebrate the Star of David. And the Jews of Ethiopia also have monasteries and monks, and you go to confession to the Jewish monks. They have animal sacrifices in their temples with their priests. They have their holy places. And so you have this blending of Judaism and Christianity in Ethiopia, which is unique in the world. The Ethiopian Christian Bible is twice as long as the Bible we use in the West. All kinds of ancient books written by the Ethiopians and by their saints and prophets are part of the Ethiopian Bible. The Ethiopian Jewish Bible is twice as long as the Bible used by European and Israeli Jews, containing books long lost by the Jews of Palestine and Israel and the West, where they have preserved this ancient culture. Well, why did the Queen of Sheba and Menelik I play such an important role in Ethiopian history? Well, every country has to have a legitimacy for its government. Not too long ago, we saw the crowning of King Charles III. A central part of his coronation was when the Archbishop came and anointed him with holy oils to say that your crown not only comes from English history, but it is blessed by God. Anna and Vladimir, the first great czars of Russia, claimed to be the descendants of the Empire of Byzantium. Above that, we see the Pope crowning the Holy Roman Emperor of Western Europe. Again, when bishops bless kings, it is giving God's approval. When George Washington decided to add the words, "So help me God," to his Pledge of Allegiance, he was asking God to bless his presidency. And so kings and emperors, whether they are of the kings of Thailand or the kings of Europe or presidents of the United States, always need some type of divine legitimacy to say that I am not just the king because the people have elected me or because I killed the president and declared myself a dictator, but my rule is also blessed by God. Well, Ethiopia was lost in the middle of Africa, but it's as a Christian country, it was in contact with the Christians of Alexandria, of Jerusalem, of Constantinople, the Byzantines, and of Rome. And so it was part of the Christian world. It was also in trade links with India and Persia and even China. So the ancient kingdom of Aksum was part of the ancient world until in the 600s a new religion emerged. And that was Islam emerging from Arabia, Mecca and Medina, conquering the Middle East, conquering Persia, conquering Egypt, North Africa, and Ethiopia ended up being a Christian island completely surrounded by Muslims. And so Ethiopia was isolated. It was no longer in contact with the Christian world. Well, in 960, the Jews had become so powerful in Ethiopia that under Queen Judith in 960, the Jews seized power in Ethiopia. This was the dynasty of Gideon, which ruled from the 8th to the 12th century. Horrendous persecution of Christians, destructions of monasteries and libraries. The Ethiopians were forced to convert to Judaism. The wars between the Jews and the Christians was brutal, and the ancient capital city of Aksum, the city of the Queen of Sheba, was completely destroyed. The ancient monuments, the pillars which we see on the right, were toppled and destroyed. Well, the Jews established a new capital. This was the capital of Gondar, which they attempted to make Ethiopia into a Jewish kingdom. And we see the remains of the forts and the palaces from the Jewish period. Well, finally, in 1270, the Christians were able to restore Christian rule of Ethiopia and defeat the Jewish takeover. And Yekeno Amalek ruled Ethiopia and built a brand new capital, and this was the capital of Lalibela. You see one of the famous stone churches carved out of the mountains on the right, and that's me when I was there and visited these stone churches. So Ethiopia returned to Christianity. I happened to be there in 2019 for the Festival of the Baptism of Jesus in the Jordan River. And here you see the Ethiopian Christian priests and patriarchs and bishops with their umbrellas, because even though it was January, it was very hot. On the upper right, you see the roof of one of the churches carved into the ground, into the stone. An absolutely magnificent architectural achievement. Everywhere you went in Ethiopia, they were again celebrating the Queen of Sheba and her son, the Emperor Menelik. Murals painted on the walls, the famous brass crosses which the artisans make. Everywhere the Queen of Sheba and her son Menelik I are celebrated. This was the national myth of Ethiopia. Queen of Sheba, Solomon, and the descendants of Solomon as the emperors of Ethiopia. This legend preserved the Ethiopians. Even though they were surrounded by Muslim armies, they were able to defend their independence. Well, this national myth is similar to the American myth of manifest destiny, where until today, Donald Trump wants to take over Canada, Mexico, Greenland, and Panama as part of our destiny. The mission civilisatrice of the French to civilize the world. Moscow believes it is the third Rome, direct heir to the Roman Empire. The Jews firmly believe that they are God's chosen people destined to rule an empire from the Euphrates to the Nile. So the Ethiopians adopted the Queen of Sheba as their national myth. Well, the Queen of Sheba has achieved fame not only in Ethiopia. As you can see, movies were made about the Queen of Sheba, the great love story between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and the birth of a new empire, Ethiopia. The Nebuchadnezzar, the holy book of the Ethiopians, describing the Queen of Sheba, has been accepted as the holy book of the Rastafarians in Jamaica when the African slaves of the Americas looked back to Africa. They looked to the Queen of Sheba for inspiration. And as the poster on the right says, the 225th emperor, direct descendant from Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, is the King of Kings, the Lion of Judah. Haile Selassie means power of the Trinity. So the Queen of Sheba legend, story, history, whatever you'll call it, lives on. Films are made. Respighi, the great Italian composer, wrote Belkis, the Queen of Sheba. The Queen of Sheba opera was performed on Broadway in New York in the 1800s. Liberated African American women have adopted the Queen of Sheba as one of their liberated women to be emulated. She was a woman of ancient times who carved out high-ranking positions, an independent woman who became a fabulously wealthy Arabian or African kingdom to the south of Judah. In her footsteps, a wonderful book of 101 remarkable black women, from the Queen of Sheba to Queen Latifah. Now, the Queen Latifah was not a real queen, so I don't want to disturb you, but the Queen of Sheba was a real queen. She was a black feminist pop icon. Again, in the book by Goodman, little is known about her, but she is an alluring symbol, a woman who left her mark on history, and a black woman from Africa as well. Video games, all kinds of games. The Queen of Sheba's Sword, Sheba Review, Sheba New Dawn, continue to spread the fame of this famous woman. Now, one issue that has been a constant problem is how is she portrayed? The painting on the left by the 1800 Demon painter Giovanni Demon portrays her as a very white-skinned woman. In the middle, in the Cathedral of Cologne, a stained glass window shows her as a dark-skinned woman. Edward Slocum in 1907 again portrayed her as a ravishingly beautiful white woman. Well, whatever color you want to give her, she is a major figure. This is a picture of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, the sanctuary of paradise. Every Ethiopian church in Ethiopia and among the diaspora in places like America and Australia and England, every Ethiopian church will have a picture, a painting, a mural, a mosaic of the Queen of Sheba approaching King Solomon. Well, the black versus white issue is not just a question of the Queen of Sheba. In Mexico, when Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared to Juan Diego, the picture in the middle, she was portrayed as a Nahuatl speaking Indian, such as the one we see on the right. But European painters couldn't admit that Mary, the mother of Jesus, would appear as a dark-skinned woman, and so they painted her as a white woman. So white versus black remains an issue. Same thing with Cleopatra. Cleopatra, who was of 100% Greek blood, in modern days is again being portrayed as an Egyptian black woman. Here again, the Queen of Sheba is mixed up in the whole white versus black issue. Well, the Queen of Sheba continues to be part of Ethiopian history. On the left, we see the Queen of Sheba Hotel in Addis. I didn't stay there, it was too expensive. The Queen of Sheba Hotel in Aksum, where I never got. We can see a more modest structure. And in Las Vegas, we have Sheba, Queen of the Night Entertainment. We have Queen of Sheba restaurants, Queen of Sheba entertainment areas. And she is still being popularized. Ethiopian restaurants in Los Angeles, in New York, and around the world. Whenever you have an Ethiopian restaurant, you're going to have an area devoted to the Queen of Sheba, or even the restaurant named for the Queen of Sheba. The Israelis have also adopted the Queen of Sheba since Sheba was south of Jerusalem. So it might well have been the city of Elat. So they have developed a Queen of Sheba hotel in Elat. So the only concrete information we have of the Queen of Sheba was in Matthew, the Queen of the South. And so anywhere, whether it is Ethiopia, whether it is Yemen, whether it is Great Zimbabwe or Eilat, these are all possible contestants. Well, we are still looking for the Queen of Sheba, and I am still looking for the Queen of Sheba, and hopefully I will get to the great city of Aksum sometime in the near future. Well, this is part of the great series I have on the lost cities of the world. On the right, there's me on Argentina, visiting one of the ancient lost cities of the Jesuits in South America, where they tried to create utopias for the Indians of South America to preserve them from the Portuguese slave traders. So, cities like Atlantis are still to be discovered. The cities of Angkor Wat and Machu Picchu have been discovered. They're still discovering lost cities in the jungles of the Amazon and of the Yucatan and of the deep jungles of the Amazon. I'm waiting for Elon Musk to send his rockets to the moon and to the Mars and discovering the ruins of ancient lost cities. So this is Ronald Brown logging off. I hope you enjoyed the talk today, and I hope to hear from you and see you in the future. Thank you very much, and have a lovely evening.